Welcome to another episode of the Crypto Gaming Institute podcast. You can see who we have on today, a complete and total badass. As you all may know, I'm obsessed with DG, with decentral games, especially because I feel like you guys are, and it's a we, I'm part of it too, not in the same way you are, but, definitely a part of it. It is one of the most brilliant setups from a tokenomics, an economic standpoint. You're a virtual economist. You're the chief operating officer. And so I'm just totally excited to dive into all things play to earn, DG, and then your story too. So maybe we could start off by really understanding a little bit more about who you are and how you got to this spot. So really, would love to understand and hear about your story.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me on and appreciate all the kind words there about DG. In terms of background, I got degrees in math and economics, going on like 10 years ago now. Happened to be really interested in game theory, but didn't work in crypto or gaming for quite a while. I think the story is similar for a lot of folks where I was working for Amazon for quite a while, doing partnership sort of work, finance, and then partnerships for a little over 4 years. Got really interested in Ethereum through my brother, Scott, which will come up a little bit later because he was one of the founders of DG. Back in like mid 2017, was in Decentraland in like 2018, hearing about Matic, but was still working then at Amazon and later Credit Karma for a little bit. And it took me until about a year ago, so early 2021, to make the jump full time, and was really lucky to have Scott as a younger brother who was, along with Miles, founders of this project, DG, and have been actually building in the space for about 3 years. So I was keeping up really closely. I think I would say advising going back in 2020, but didn't come on full time until Q1 of the year. And then think that it's been a good match in terms of skill set to be able to come in and do some of the partnership work, everything like payroll, contracts, that sort of stuff. And then token economics and design. The virtual economist thing is a bit of like an inside joke where A16Z said that sort of virtual economist would be like the career title of the decade, given the play to earn stuff. So I went and immediately claimed virtualeconomist.eth.
I love it. That was a brilliant move right there. So let's talk a little bit about this idea of a virtual economist. Like at its core, what are you actually doing? Like are you thinking through, how do I make this thing, this virtual, is it, are you starting at the project level or the currency level? Like, how are you making this thing as valuable as possible or as sustainable as possible? Like how do you even start to think about all of this at a foundational level?
Sure. So, I mean, in the context that it was being described, it was around play to earn ecosystems that have been around a long time, or at least virtual economies going back to like Eve Online, for example. I think a lot of your audience would know about like Axie Infinity, for example. So in that context, centered around a game, people are earning tokens, people are buying items, maybe selling tokens. Some have the concept of breeding them together to change the traits, or in our case, like upgrading items. And then, I would say you want to be growing sustainably is sort of the goal, right? Like want to have people coming in and then want to have people reinvesting into the community, the experience, the game. You start to run into issues if the incentives aren't right and people are just selling off the tokens, for example.
Totally. I think we've actually seen a lot of that happen with most, if not all, of the incentive structure of like staking or farming or earning in game. It's just like a farm and dump situation where they're just trying to extract as much value from the ecosystem as possible. But really, like, I really want to take a step back and like try to understand this from the perspective of where do you start, right? Because it seems to me like a lot of this is focused in on tokens and NFTs, which are also tokens. But so we have tokens, right? And
Yep.
at some level, I feel like the majority, actually, sadly enough, the majority of people don't even understand what a token really is, besides like, oh, I can ape in and make 100x and then change my life. But like fundamentally, how do you view a token? Um, People try to make the comparison to like stocks. I
Yeah.
don't really think that's a fair comparison. Like from that level, like where are you starting with that? How do you even view tokens in the first place? And then how do you integrate a token into an ecosystem in a healthy, sustainable way?
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, so you have generally like ERC20 tokens. Think about DeFi. A lot of those are currencies or like layer ones. More recently, you have a lot more governance tokens where, let's say you have a protocol that does something like Sushi Swap, um, incentivizes people to provide liquidity, and then Sushi Swap takes fees. Those go to like the Sushi Swap Treasury, and then Sushi is the governance token of that treasury. That's a pretty common model where Rarible would be similar. Unlike OpenSea, they take fees. Those fees accrue to the treasury of the project or of the DAO. And then like Rary is the governance token. Some people can vote on how those funds are allocated. And so Mana, Decentraland's currency, also has a DAO. They have a bit of a different model, but generally their Mana serves as like a currency in the game and as the governance token of the DAO. So within the Decentral Games ecosystem, we have a treasury that mostly contains Decentraland land, pretty large Matic node. I think the 5th or 6th largest Polygon Matic node. So that accrues some fees. And then revenue from some of our original games, like the blackjack and roulette tables. Excuse me. And then lastly, like we provide a lot of the liquidity to the tokens. So hopefully that didn't go too much over the heads of the audience. I'm not sure how in the weeds they are about all of this, but that's another thing that's pretty important, is that you need to have liquidity for people to be able to trade your token on places like QuickSwap and Uniswap. So we provide that ourselves. Okay, so the treasury has a bunch of assets, and then the holders of DG token can vote on what we do with those assets. So that would be one example of a design and how DG fits in. And then ICE is something separate. That's like the in-game currency for ice poker, which is a bit of a different sort of game, but I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about that. And I didn't even touch on NFTs, but I feel like I'm going kind of long.
All good. All good. This is a long form interview, so that's what we're here for. But let's actually zoom in for a sec on the DG token, right? Because again, I am I love DG. I love everything DG. And as you well know, we actually teamed up together and recently launched Decentral Gamer, which is a new podcast for the DG ecosystem. So very excited about that. So clearly I'm biased, but aren't we all? But to really zoom in here and use this as a case study to share with people the information and the knowledge about more crypto in general and crypto gaming and how to like not get wrecked, right? And how to really know what's going on. So the DG token itself is a governance token, right? For people that are looking to, let's say they love DG also, or they love any project that they want to participate in. How do you view the token as a vehicle to bet on that project or to bet on that ecosystem? Because I feel like people think, if I like this, I buy the token, and that is how I bet on this thing. How do you see that
Yeah.
um, in this ecosystem?
Okay, that's a good question, and I'm not going to pretend I know, exactly which like ERC20 tokens are going to pump and for what reason. Like it'd be very hard to justify like how you get to the valuations of Dogecoin and Shiba or something like that. But
Right.
within gaming, in particular, or for like protocols that are generating a lot of revenue, like some of the figures that Axie Infinity has posted with their 2.7 million daily active users, over $1 billion a month in marketplace fees. Sorry, over $1 billion a month in marketplace revenue. Then they take 4% of that. Then you can start backing into a little bit more so like a traditional company and saying they're generating like free cash flow, figuring out what their costs are, and saying this is like super rough math, but you could say, oh, well, they're making $40 million a month in fees. They have some other revenue streams. That's like $500 million a year. Let's put like a multiple on revenue there. Let's make it pretty high because we think they can continue to grow. And then you can kind of see how you would justify Axie's, I think, $6 or $7 billion valuation based on circulating. So it's easier to value something that's already moving, has already launched a product, is making money, because you're investing at the stage that they're effectively already public. There's like a lot of liquidity. Axie Infinity, I think, launched 3 or 4 years ago. But then there's also, I think people get caught up in the idea of being like really, really early on something. But then, of course, the risk is a lot higher there. So if you're investing in a project with a 100 million or even $1 billion valuation and they haven't launched a product yet, it's very hard to value, what's their growth going to be from 0 users? Like, what are they going to be making in 2 or 3 years? How much of this is just hype? So I would say that's riskier, but then of course, it's easy to get caught up in those stories of people who bought X, Y, or Z token in 2019 and now it's up 100x, 2 years later. So not sure how helpful that is, but I would say it's safer to invest in more established teams, projects that have a live product, a fairly substantial number of users. And then in the gaming space, who are making a game that's like interesting and fun. So
totally. Well, I guess what I kind of want to get at, and I know I'm harping on this, but I think it's so important because most people I think they don't even think about it really because they're not aware. But like, let's say for the DG Treasury, right? That is a powerhouse of a machine, an economic machine. Unlike most games, DG is actually generating significant amounts of revenue, and the treasury is growing, and the player base is growing, and it is up, and it is continuing to grow at an increasing rate, which is very exciting and very powerful. The DG token itself, it is not necessarily, though, like it's not a share of ownership in that treasury, but it does give you the utility of voting rights to help influence the treasury in a way. So like, so you may think like, okay, if I want to bet on the DG ecosystem, I have to decide first and foremost if I do want to make that bet. And I think, okay, yes, I do want to allocate capital there. But then you have to decide what asset within the ecosystem you have to allocate to, whether it be the governance token, whether it be the in-game currency, whether it be the NFTs. So like, how do you think through that dynamic of, yes, it may be a governance token, but that does not equate to ownership directly. yes, there may be multiple assets within here, so I have to decide what I actually want to invest in. Like, how do you think about that from like a mental model, intellectual infrastructure type of way?
God, that's a really interesting question. Where first give the example of Axie Infinity, where you could have invested in AXS, which is their governance token. You could have invested in buying a team of Axies, the in-game items, or thousands of Axies, and started delegating them out, as many guilds did. Many guilds raised money and started doing that. You could have bought SLP, the in-game currency, and like out of those, depending on when you bought, probably the lowest like variance you would have gotten plus best return would have been to buy the governance token. But then the most sort of passive income would have been from buying the Axies, which have also performed pretty well. Investing in the in-game currency would have done pretty poorly. SLP in comparison, depending on when you bought, was at a cent and then up to 40 cents and now down to 2 cents. Whereas AXS was at $1 and now it's more in the $50 to $100 range. Likewise, Axies are up pretty substantially over the last year or so, but down recently. So I think that it generally makes more sense to invest in the in-game assets or the governance token for the DAO, where the incentives are in place, I think, for like the team and investors to do things that like accrue value to the governance token, as well as it's really important for the assets in the ecosystem to retain their value, I think. Whereas the economics can be tweaked so that, just hypothetically, if ICE token crashed 50% overnight, that would be a big problem, and it would mean that the way we had things wasn't very sustainable. We haven't seen that sort of variance. But in theory, we could say, well, we'll pay out twice as many ICE tokens. And of course, that would cause more of a problem, more inflation.
Vicious cycle.
But actually, it doesn't. When we launched ICE token, we were talking about like, should it be $1 a token? Should it be a cent? Should it be 1/100th of a cent? And of course, it doesn't really matter. You're making an ERC20 token with 18 decimals of precision. You could say, I'll give you 1,000,000 of this thing that's 1/100th of a cent, or I'll give you 100 of this thing that's $1 each. Those are both $100. So I think that in-game currencies will generally be a lot more volatile, and there's not necessarily a ton of value accruing to those. And then finally, like, I wanted to come back to a comment you made earlier about ICE holding up very well, some other currencies crashing. Won't name names, but I think one of the big reasons for that is that we already had a really well-established treasury when we started out. So we had the funds in place I just pulled up the figure. Today we have about $7 million in quick swap liquidity for USDC and ICE. So just a lot of depth for people to be earning ICE and then making the decision to sell it, or for people who have multiple wearables, multiple delegates, to earn XP and go buy ICE without making it, a huge move there. I think a lot of games, when they launch, they'll sell a ton of NFTs at the outset. So let's say they say, we're going to sell 10,000 of these NFTs, arbitrary game sort of NFTs. They raise a couple hundred ETH or something. And understandably, they need to use a lot of those funds for development. And then as soon as the game goes live, they have very little money backing their in-game currency because they've used some of it. And they have 10,000 people, or at least 10,000 NFTs, let's say a couple thousand owners, who are really eager to hop in there and start earning tokens and get an ROI on their investment right off the start. And with all those inflationary models you were talking about earlier, maybe there's something like you can buy the token on the market and then you can like inflate, you can get more and more items, which gets you more and more tokens, something like that. So it'll pump up initially, but then ultimately there's nothing backing the token there. Whereas in our case, we had seen what was happening with some of those games, and even Axie is struggling as they grew from 10,000 daily actives to 2 million daily actives over a couple of months. And I think they've done remarkably well to grow that quickly and just well beyond anyone else. But that puts a lot of strain on things. So for us, we said, all right, we're going to launch 500 items and we're going to take $1 million from our treasury and back the token. And we knew that even if every person played the game and dumped 100% of their tokens, like this would still last for a while and we could test like what was the actual behavior on upgrades. So we are almost 3 months into having this play to earn ecosystem, and ICE has been fairly volatile. It started at a cent, it went up to 30, down to 8, up to 20. Now it's at about 15. But if you look over the last 2 months, it's been fairly stable in that range. And we've seen a lot of the sort of in-game behavior trend towards a more stable level. I can talk about some of those metrics.
Yeah. So I think what you touched on is really important there, of learning from the incumbents in the market and seeing, okay, this is what people are doing. This is what they're doing well. This is what they're not doing so well. Okay, let's test a new model. And I love the decision to go slower, and not from the perspective of like not trying to grow and be aggressive in the marketplace, but from the perspective of like, Jeff Bezos says, regardless of what you think of him as a person, brilliant business person, and he says slow is smooth and smooth is fast, right? And I think we're seeing the benefits of, I don't even want to say slow, but like being deliberate about not overloading the system and not making too big of a bet on a financial experiment, on an economic experiment, with a number of NFTs released immediately. And now we're seeing there have been multiple rounds of mints to release new NFTs into the ecosystem, and the demand is outrageous. The demand is outrageous. People can't wait to snap them up as quickly as humanly freaking possible, which is very exciting to see. From the perspective of setting up your on ramps and off ramps for the in game economy, maybe you could explain how you set that up and how you thought about this idea of, okay, well, there needs to be a certain amount of consumption of um, the in-game currency, because you need to have that demand there. You need to have that buy pressure to keep the price stable. At the same time, knowing people are playing and earning, and what they're earning, they want to be able to use that and compound their earnings. So there is going to be some sell pressure as well. How did you think about that? Maybe you could give us an idea of what it looks like from a
Yep.
holistic ecosystem, and then how you arrived at the conclusion to set it up in those ways.
All right. So the way it works, at first I'll just say one big benefit we had is we had already built poker. So we didn't have to build this from scratch when we had the idea. The way it works is that people can either purchase a wearable. These wearables, if you head to like Decentral Games on Twitter, you can see a couple of the videos of the drops, the items, people posting. So I was wearing them. You buy a Decentraland wearable that's ICE enabled, either minting. Mint tomorrow will be 0.5 ETH, or on secondary, the floor for an item there is about 1.1 ETH. And then with that, you can play ice poker, which is just a poker game where you come in with 3,000 chips for one item. If you're wearing two, it's 3,500. But let's say you can wear up to 5 items to 5,000 chips. Let's say you come in with 3,000 chips, you play poker for a couple of hours, and then depending on how you do in terms of chip performance that day, we have a leaderboard, really like a percentile board, where if you're in the top 5%, you get a 2x multiplier. If you're in the bottom 5%, you're getting 0.3 multiplier, and sort of everything in between there. And then the baseline amount of ice that you're earning is essentially luck based. So we have challenges like get 3 of a kind twice, or get a full house, that are basically time-based. Get 2 pair 5 times. Things that you can look up, like the poker odds. We know how many hands per hour are being played. We can come up with challenges that you won't always hit, but if you played long enough during the day, you would. And we generally see people completing challenges. So if you complete all 3, you get 330 ICE token. ICE is trading at around 12 cents. So that's about almost $40 a day that you could be making playing ICE, completing the challenges, if you finish right there, sort of in the middle of the pack. Or you can be doing better or worse depending on how you actually play. So there's an interesting dynamic there, where there are certainly some people who are just trying to play through a lot of hands. And then there'll be other people who are trying to get their bonus up because they've already completed enough challenges as well. So we're still thinking about the specific challenges, but a lot of that design around earning ICE, and should also say you earn experience points from challenges, is similar to other play to earn games. But then rather than having in-game characters, because usually it's not clothing, it's characters in some of these games that breed, or you stake them and it generates more. Like with the wolf game, you stake sheep, and I think you get more sheep for doing that, but you keep the original sheep. In this case, we designed it so that you upgrade the items. So within Axie Infinity, you could take 2 Axies and breed them 7 times. Now you have 9 Axies. It gets more and more expensive to do it each time, I should say. But in this case, you buy 1 wearable, you upgrade it, the level 1 gets burned, you now have a level 2. And it earns ICE at a faster rate, about a 10% faster rate. And a lot of work goes into designing the items. When we create a set, we have generally like shoes, pants, shirt, a hat or similar, and some other sort of accessory item, that we're making 5 items times 5 levels and a male and female fit. So these are like 50 3D files. And you, if you don't want to play poker, or if you have, say, many wearables, you can also pursue the delegator approach or the guild approach, which is to find someone to play with your item. They get 70%, you get 30% of their earnings. There's also like a marketplace where people are trying to find and create these relationships with players. And there's a lot of competition for the better players, where you could offer them a high level item or multiple items to play because they've shown that they perform really well. So let's see, did I cover exactly how it works there? And then mint revenue accrues to the DG DAO secondary sales. We've done about 2,000 ETH in secondary sales on OpenSea. So that's 5% of that is about 100 ETH to the DAO. And another really important stat in the ecosystem that we're tracking is just how much ICE people are burning compared to how much they're earning. And it's about 50% at the moment. So what that means is that you need some other mechanisms for ICE to be taken off the market, or else it'll continuously decline. But there aren't any play to earn games at the moment where it's exactly 1. That would be pretty exceptional. Like, our goal is to get as close to there as possible, but that would mean that every single count of ICE being put out, paid to players, was being burned and reinvested in the ecosystem directly in the gameplay. So we're not quite there yet, but for someone like Axie, it's more like 20% of it at the moment is being burned or accrued through breeding. We're about 50%, but at a smaller scale. So don't worry, we're not getting too cocky. We know they're at a much bigger scale. And then we make up for the deficit so far by minting NFTs in ICE and then burning that ICE, but have some other good ideas for mechanisms there that would make the game more fun. Because for this to be sustainable, a lot of the money that goes out needs to come back in the form of components of the gameplay, or components of this meta game around upgrading items.
I totally agree. So let's just make it super, super easy for a complete beginner to get in, right? So they're like, okay, I want to play. It seems like I need to either mint my own wearable in order to play, or I can buy it on the secondary market, or someone can delegate it to me. Let's
Right.
let's
You can
let's
come
put
in for free and earn ice if you can
l-
find someone to delegate to you.
well let's put delegation to the side for a second. Um, what exactly are the steps somebody would need to take from like complete newbie to like getting a wallet, putting in their first, however many dollars of uh, putting in their first dollars, and then what they turn it into, hook up, what do they buy, what do they click to actually like be able to make then their first dollar in the DG ecosystem?
Got it. Okay, so you will need an ETH wallet. So, or not an ETH wallet, but like let's say something like MetaMask or Fortmatic. So you can interact with stuff on ETH mainnet. The games are all on Polygon, but you're going to be signing into Decentraland on ETH mainnet, and there's going to be a lot of other things there. That doesn't cost anything, so you can just download MetaMask as a Chrome browser extension. Go to go to Decentraland, pop in as a guest. If you want to claim a name in Decentraland, there's some cost there, but let's ignore that for now. You can be a guest each time you play. So that's how you get into Decentraland in the first place. But even before that, once you have this set up, and I would direct, I'm kind of getting choppy through all the steps in the right order, because it is a little bit technical to use Polygon as well. So there's this concept of networks within MetaMask where I feel like I'm walking through, I could pull up our FAQ and it would probably help me do this. But at the top, there's an option to add network. So if you look up the Polygon RPC, I think it's like 137, you're looking up the URL for it, the token name, then you can toggle between ETH mainnet, Polygon mainnet, and then you can do this with any other chain like XDAI or Binance Smart Chain, whatever else. Go through this process of interacting, often with the same wallet address. So ETH and Polygon, you'll have the same wallet address across both. And so at that point, you would just need to share only your public wallet address with the person that's going to delegate to you, and then they can go to our site, click delegate on the item that they own, copy in your address, and we'll take care of the rest in the back end. There are no gas fees on Polygon that we're charging users. We pay those ourselves, and it's really a very small cost because basically anytime someone is doing an interaction, it's a couple cents to go through. Once you have the wearable delegated to you, you can pop into any of our 3 ice poker venues, the Stronghold, Dex Tower, Chateau Satoshi. Check in. It should now show up on the top left of the screen that you can check in with that item that's been delegated to you, and you can start playing. Should be pretty straightforward, assuming you know the rules of poker. So you may need to take that step and start earning ice. And then you can claim ice directly from our site, which will, again, for free, be deposited into your wallet. And then let's see. If you're doing this to move the funds out, you're going to need to move it to an exchange that supports Polygon network, like Binance, I believe, does.
Well, we don't have to worry about off ramping right now, but on the other, so that's how to get started as a delegator. I mean, as somebody getting delegated to.
Right.
For somebody who is looking to actually buy one, a wearable, and start playing on their own. Okay, we've gotten to the point where we have a wallet. We now need to get some funds into that wallet in order to be able to then mint an NFT.
Sure. That's yeah. On the other side, like, depending on how much capital you're looking to allocate to this. We've seen people who want to get a large guild right off the bat go and buy 5, 10, 20 of these off of OpenSea, or buy a full outfit, maybe to show it off and because they want to play themselves with 5 items and then delegate 2 items to 2 players. So we also have owner players who delegate. Like there's a lot of ways to participate in the ecosystem, but if you're not trying to acquire a ton of items at once, the most cost-effective way to do it is currently to mint an item for 0.5 ETH. You have to have 0.5 on Polygon Network. You also have to have 1,000 XDG, so our governance token, in order to qualify for the mint. Just because demand is really, really high, so we want to make sure that we're rewarding the people who belong to the DG DAO and have some stake in governance. So at the moment, I think that's about $440 in DG, and 0.5 ETH is around $1,600. So it's not cheap for someone outside of crypto to get into in the first place. But if you start doing the math on like, okay, I'm going to pay $1,600 for this item to mint it, but I'm currently earning $20 to $80 a day with sort of a mean of like 40. Well, I can make my money back in about 40 days playing. That's a great investment from mint to making your money back in 40 days, which relies on ICE price being stable. And then you're also taking some risk that the value of the NFT goes down. So I'm not saying it's risk-free, but like the risk you're taking on is very well compensated by the amount of ICE you're earning based on the economics today. So you can mint 1 item per wallet per mint, but this will be our 6th mint. So by now you could be up to 6 items accrued at 0.5 or less. Some earlier mints were even less. Whereas we have some of our largest guilds who have purchased on secondary as many as 40 or 50 items at an ETH a piece and are delegating those out. So it depends where you are in terms of what your stage is here, an amount of crypto that you're willing to invest in the ecosystem, whether you're trying to build a really large guild right off the bat, building up over time and upgrading items, using the rewards to then mint next time, or whether you're coming in from scratch and just playing, being delegated to. So we've heard some great stories on that front where someone I was delegating to saved up the ICE, purchased the NFT next time, and then decided that the best thing they could do was continue playing with my higher level NFT delegated to them, and then they're delegating the item to someone else. And then they made enough to mint for ETH last time, and now they have their own item to play with and an item to delegate out to someone else. And like, love to see it. They started with no initial investment, but invested their time in the ecosystem and believed that, this would sustain, saved it up. And now they have, at least last time I talked to him, could be more, 2 items that they're delegating out to folks. So you can build this up from scratch, or you can come in with a significant amount of money. It caters to however much you're willing to invest.
That's awesome. And if you think about it from the perspective of you're investing in an asset and then you're looking to have that asset throw cash flow off, like throw off cash flow, turning it into a productive asset, where else are you going to get all of your money back? And then you can then be in almost pure profit after an average of 40 days. Or let's even say, let's be super pessimistic and say 80 days. That's like unheard of in traditional finance. If you look at people in real estate, for example, they're excited to make a 1% per month return because they're usually charging rent in the form of 1% of the total cost of that asset per month as rent. So to be able to make back 100% in, let's just say, 80 days, that's pretty ridiculous. So when you're thinking of like having this be an investment for people, I mean, that's off the chain. That's pretty bonkers.
Yeah, absolutely. And you like that's if you yourself are playing with one item. So to be totally transparent here, if your goal is to buy 5 of them and then delegate them out, you're going to earn 30% of that amount. So let's say it takes 3 times longer and it's 120 days or 240 days. But another way to put 120-day ROI is 300% APR, right? If you earn your money back every 120 days, that's like 300% interest being paid on the items. So, I mean, you can compare this to other ecosystems. I think that part of it is supported by a ton of growth that we have right now as well. There's just insane demand to play the game. So I guess coming back to what we were saying earlier, there's a benefit to getting in early as well, where there's a lot of excitement and interest in the game. But we're also building this to sustain much lower growth rates, or even no growth, where in the very long run you had millions of people playing the game, 100,000 people quit, 100,000 people join the game that month. Like, you should still be trying to design mechanisms for like a steady state years from now, where you say, well, how do we make money to support the ICE token in that state? I mean, the answer is mostly the velocity of the NFTs, trading on secondary, and then taking a fee there. Could almost think about it as like that secondary fee is like taxes within the economy. That's how Axie sustains today, is off of those secondary sales in their marketplace.
Which is a beautiful model, a beautiful model. So let's now kind of scope out. I feel like we've done a really good job of like investigating the DG ecosystem, understanding the tokenomics, and really like deep diving into that very extensively. So I want to kind of scope out and understand, just from a purely like crypto gaming perspective, what are you seeing as where we are on the timeline? Because I think we're still pretty early, just in the grand scheme of things. But I would love to understand from you, like, where are we on the timeline? Maybe you can help us quantify it in some way, and where are we going in the long run with this?
Sure, I agree with you that we are still really early. When you look at Decentraland's numbers being 500,000 uniques a month, I think was their latest. Axie Infinity was 2 or 3 million. They're the largest. Those are really the two largest players in the crypto gaming space, at least that I'm aware of right now. Happy to be corrected if there's a larger one I don't know about. And you compare that to like a Fortnite, Minecraft, Destiny 2 sort of game that just has like tens of millions or hundreds of millions of players. Roblox, for example, like some other stats are that there are 3 or 4 billion gamers in the world. I forget exactly how it's defined, but some trailing period did you play platform games on PC or mobile or something. And so, like a lot of other areas in crypto where you compare like trading volume in crypto to stocks, for example, derivatives, it's nowhere close. You come up with some pretty silly comparisons, like how large is the global real estate market? And it's like hundreds of trillions of dollars. How large is the metaverse real estate market? It's a few $billion, which is still big, but it's like 1% of 1% of 1%. So I guess if you factored in like what percent of players are playing like play to earn or crypto games, it's going to be a tiny fraction of 1% of total gamers. So I would say we're very early. If you think this is going to be a big deal in the future, then take a look at the 2 or 3 million people playing these sorts of games. Let's be generous, call it 5 million compared to 3 billion gamers worldwide. So I would say we're pretty early, and that where we're going with this is that people are going to demand ownership over digital assets. Like, it's something that people care a lot about. we're seeing in the US a lot of backlash against Facebook, Google, even Apple, Amazon, data practices and stuff. People are spending like hours every day on their computers, on their phones. Like probably a lot of people I know are spending more than half of their waking hours in these digital spaces. And yet they don't have a way to own, their identity, their assets. Like NFTs are a big part of that. Art is a component, but gamers are already familiar with buying skins, expansion packs, etc. And I think that having a crypto settlement layer for those assets, like I want to see the day that I can take the clothes we're making in Decentraland for Ice Poker and wear them in Sandbox, Crypto Voxels, Somnium Space, the next big metaverses that come out, because the metaverse is more about, this decentralized ownership of assets than it is about like any one virtual reality or like 3D world. So I think we're heading towards multi-chain, multi-metaverse, hundreds, thousands of games, but user ownership and like users are rewarded for playing the games.
I love that. And I actually think you're spot on with it. And in that you're absolutely right that the demand for digital goods that demand is only going to increase, because we're going to spend more and more and more time existing in digital worlds. And when you're existing in a digital world, as we're seeing currently with NFTs, but more on like the PFP side of it, we want to we want to be cool. We want to be stylish. We want to be able to express ourselves and be unique in that way. And so just at that level, we're seeing, billions of dollars of transaction volume, on different marketplaces. But then add in when we actually use assets to do things in this world, and we're spending money there, but we're spending native money there. And then we have the things we use are all assets, and then we can take an ownership in that. And it just seems to me both inevitable and incredible all at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I think the T in NFT is really important. The non-fungible part, of course, as well. But people think about, especially people outside the space, NFTs as images, right? There's that joke that you can right-click save someone's, Bored Ape or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, the image exists. It's out there. It's posted all over the place. It's in I've right-click saved my ape on my phone and computer, and the image is there. But there's one token where you have this provenance going back to the Bored Ape Yacht Club creators. They made 10,000 of them from this contract, auto-generated them. And now, this is token 4380. And you can see that it's in the RyanDG.eth wallet. And it's that fact that's valuable, that the provenance, the token, where it is. And then people really value belonging to these communities. Like I found that personally was just very lucky getting into apes, for example, because they were entering Decentraland back in, I don't know, June, July. And were looking for help to host their venue. And they had a riverboat. They worked with Meshroom, shout out to Meshroom, to make a lot of the designs for it. And so got to meet the team and got to invest fairly early in it because I just loved the art and stuff. But I've come to first of all, really care about that community, having met a ton of people in the Bored Ape Yacht Club, both online, probably hundreds of them, and in New York. And they know me as that ape. So 99 out of 100 of them, or I don't know, 90% of them don't have any idea what I look like. So maybe if they're watching this now, they do. But they know me as that ape. That's all rolled up in my digital identity, background, credibility is that image. So that's what really makes them valuable, is the community built around them. And I think the same is true of physical art too. So it's not restricted to NFTs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to thank you, Ryan, so much for coming on the show today. I know I was kind of grilling you on the economy stuff, so I
Good.
appreciate you diving in with me. And actually, the fact that you were willing to dive in with me, you didn't try to skirt around the answers, just shows that there is real substance here. Nothing is more frustrating to me than when I ask a question and somebody does not answer me because it's like trying to hide something. Like if you built something you're really proud of and you want to show it off to the world, like you should want to be asked these questions because then you can demonstrate how badass your project is. So
Agreed.
just really a testament to what's going on at DG and what you've helped to build here. So kudos to you, kudos to the whole DG team. I'm excited for our podcast. I'm excited for the growth of the ecosystem. I just really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man, so thank you very much for coming on the show.
You too. I really appreciate it as well, and love what you're doing here. I'm excited about Decentral Gamer as well. So we'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. You're the man. To everybody watching and listening, y'all are also the mans and womans, and I'll see y'all on the next episode. Take care.